Buckle your seatbelts. This one's going to be a long one, so I want you to also buckle your seatbelt or lace up your shoes. Take me for a walk and really tune in here. So, although bone losses is certainly not a sexy get you off the couch because I want to look good in my jeans on Saturday night, it is something that more and more of us are concerned about. The reality really sets in when you first have that bone scan, when you have an older parent fall and fracture, and the downhill spiral that is. I'm living it right now. Today we're talking about high intensity, high impact exercise for bone losses in menopause. And that is a question mark? Really? Because at one point we would not have put high impact for sure, maybe not even high intensity exercise and bone loss or the benefit to reduction of osteoporosis in the same sentence. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, and I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset about those two things so that you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in the second and better half. And I want to give a nod to today's episode sponsor, the Flipping 50 Fitness Specialist. Whether you are a health coach or a personal trainer or both or want to be, you can learn more from a link in the show notes about how to become one, a Flipping 50 Fitness Specialist as a menopause specialist, and how to grow a successful business while you do it. I've got an upcoming webinar explaining exactly how I did what I've done with Flipping 50 and have a life and a business that I love. All right. So, is offsetting bone loss in menopause with high impact safe? Is it recommended? Aren't you more prone to fracture? This episode explores the recent research in honor of October being Menopause Awareness Month and Osteoporosis Day, which is October 20th, 2021. If you're trying to prevent, if you've been diagnosed, or if you've got younger women in your life who need this information now to be better prepared than we could have known to be, this is for you. So, again, it's a long one. Lace up your shoes and let's go. And by the way, this one also has a ton of research I'm going to mention along the way. And all of those links, if you are a prove it to me girl, I get you. So am I. Those links will be in the show notes. So let's talk bone losses in menopause. Just so that you have the picture and the idea, the average bone loss during menopause is 1.5%, kind of the percent of whatever you had in the bank at about age 30, where the door closes to adding bone density. But an average bone loss is about 1.5% per year for the spine, 1.1% to 1.4% for the femoral neck. That's the hip bone, basically. So your large thigh muscle, the end of it is the femoral neck in the first 4 to 5 years postmenopause. Now, that's an accelerated loss from prior to that point. Losses slow slightly after this. So let's say you hit menopause at 55, and you may have done it younger, may have done it older, but put your year there. And probably for the first 4 to 5 years after, till you're 60, you're losing at an accelerated rate. And that is due to the loss of estrogen that is not only muscle protecting, but bone protecting. But those losses will slow down. You'll kind of resume that speed you were going prior to menopause, but again, will increase. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Listen, only 6 months into the pandemic last year, in September, October 2020, research began to emerge about the long-term health effects of short-term muscle loss. Now, I'm talking muscle and bone kind of back and forth, so don't get lost here, but they're very related. If you lose muscle, you are very likely losing bone because you are able to do less. You're weaker. You can't lift as much. You don't have as much endurance. The possible devastating disability includes sarcopenia, which is significant muscle loss, and osteoporosis, both, as well as increased risk of obesity. A combined loss of muscle, strength, bone, with or without increased body fat, sets up females specifically for avoidable negative health effects. We are in trouble. That science comes from Geroscience, and it was released in 2020. Let's talk osteoporosis and exercise. So, as we dive in, you're going to get it deep, but I'm going to start with the basics and foundation so you understand the picture. Exercise is recommended, but often it's with poor or non specific guidelines for how it's going to have the most benefit. The purpose of this episode is to one, present the continuum of activity results on mineral density. Number two, present other valuable components of exercise. Number three, support prioritization of exercise time for you, listener, or readers, if you prefer. Four, consider a variety of exercises and non exercise interventions and their results. And five, integrate safety with the application of these exercises. Optimal exercise interventions are those favoring mechanical stimulus on bone through anti gravity loading and the stress exerted on muscles. Two types of activity for osteoporosis prevention and post diagnosis therapeutic effects are weight bearing activities and strength or resistance exercise. Let me define those. So, what is a weight bearing activity? It's defined as any activity one performs on one or more feet. Now, that's, I think, Wikipedia. Very, very basic. But technically, it would also include activity weight bearing on the upper body, such as a downward facing dog. Where bone density is concerned, there are levels of weight bearing exercise, a continuum, if you will, where on one end there's some benefit, but minimal. And after you're used to it, there is no more. And on the other end, there continues to be benefit if you can continue to increase the load. So we're talking about standing tree pose. That is weight bearing, right? You're weight bearing on that one foot. Using an elliptical, you're standing upright on it, weight bearing, but neither of those has any striking force involved. You're not picking up and putting down your heel. And where there is heel strike, such as in walking or jogging, running, the greater the strike, the greater the force to the bone. The greater the force to the bone, the greater response of the bone to get stronger. That's an important distinction. So, what is resistance or strength training exercise? Technically, resistance exercise is anything that provides additional overload to the muscle and to the bone beyond activities of your daily living. Resistance exercise includes use of machine and free weights, body weight, tubing, bands, even water exercise or swimming is viewed as resistance training by some. Now, each activity falls along a continuum again. So, as you might guess, use of machine or free weights will far surpass the benefits to bone specifically of swimming or water exercise. Use of weight training also surpasses benefits from bands or from tubing, though the use of bands and tubing might be a first step for you or potentially an only option, depending on your access to dumbbells, machine weights, or support they support lateral movements that are unachievable from free weights alone. The application, however, of heavy resistance is most beneficial and more closely mimics daily activities of life. Of the two activities for osteoporosis prevention and therapeutic efforts, meaning weight bearing and or resistance exercise has the greatest benefit. This is due to the overload and what's referred to as minimal effective stress, or MES. Minimal effective stress defined is let me define it in a more lengthy way. Walking alone has some stress, but it does not improve bone mass. I want to clarify that. Listen to it again. Walking alone does not improve your bone mass. It may have a limited contribution to slowing bone loss. Limited, and it may have. Okay. The limit to the benefits of walking occurs due to that minimal effective stress. For example, if you walk 2 or 3 miles several times a week, neither walking more days per week or walking 4 or 5 miles instead offers you more benefit to your bone. You're already adapted to the stress of your own body weight. What would potentially change or increase bone benefit would be jogging as opposed to walking, or adding a weighted vest that you wear during the walk. And note, no, not handheld weights. Please don't ask me that question. That's more strain for your shoulders and your neck than it is doing any good to anything. Similarly, with jogging, once you can jog or you run, you don't get greater benefits by running longer, more frequently. In fact, long distance runners who find that they have low body fat, low body weight, may be greater risk for low bone density. You will find few large size people who have low bone density, but small framed, frail, people with very little muscle mass and who are just overall smaller tend to be at high risk for low bone density. Older runners who do no resistance training with heavy weights are prone to fractures as much and maybe more if they have lower body weight as the general population. But here's the deal, it's not all bone strength. And we're going to dive into all of this. There's also more than the strength of the bone and the muscle in consideration of activity. As aforementioned, the balance or the stability enhancing benefit of activity also plays a part in the reducing the risk of falls where heavy resistance exercise is not possible. Say you have a condition, you're in bed rest, you've been weak. Lighter weight in balance activities alone will still be beneficial, though not to bone, to improved stability and balance. So, where we can't increase the bone density, we can improve your stability, decrease your risk of falling, and that's very important. And no matter who you are, if you're able to lift heavy, your balance and stability do not automatically get better because you're stronger. You need to specifically work on those skills. Agility, balance, coordination, they don't come from strength alone, but they must be practiced. For anyone seeking bone density and muscle strength, exercise selection should match those goals. For anyone limited by conditions, injuries, or access, a greater emphasis should be placed on balance and stability, each of which requires less equipment. In either case, balance and agility and reaction skills are specific and have to be trained. They aren't just added benefits from strength training. Okay, let's dive into the research. So, literally, me telling you these pieces and telling you I'm giving you research articles in the show notes is enough for some. For the rest of you, those curious minds and those challenging ones, here's what I want you to get. All the research is right here, and I'm going to dole it out right now. Women in menopause transition are susceptible to muscle and bone losses that lead to sarcopenia and osteoporosis, respectively. Those are mentioned earlier. That's significant loss of muscle, significant loss of bone. That makes them more prone to falls, fractures, and then increasing bed rest and instability lead to frailty and early death. That is the downward spiral, literally. So, how much is typically lost? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's an acceleration during menopause. Traditionally, the loss of muscle can be about 8% per decade, beginning at age 30. There's an annual decline in total body lean mass during The 4 to 5 years of menopause transition, it accelerates. The rapid acceleration of losses over a short period of time should set off alarms if it isn't countered with sufficient resistance training during that time or mitigated soon after. It leads to a cascade of events, including bone losses. The accelerated losses do slow again, mentioned earlier, after the surge in early postmenopause. Yet, in another decade, slightly more, those losses gain speed again to nearly 1% annual decline in leg lean body mass among women between the ages of 70 and 79. So it's about that point where getting up from a chair is a bigger deal, doing stairs is a bigger deal. And that is all coming from the Journal of Cachexia and Sarcopenia and Muscle in 2020. So, really up to date and very near pandemic times, taking into account both pieces. So, let's start at the beginning. The beginning of osteoporosis, a really true awareness. The early research for exercise in osteoporosis prevention and treatment was really conservative. The list of contraindications for those who were diagnosed was long or at the very least limiting. Recent studies, however, explore the intensity of exercise that does more than just slows bone losses in favor of that which, even after menopause, which is once thought that was game over, bone density can be improved. Early research scared many women who've been, say, avid exercise enthusiasts with a passion for maybe downhill skiing or even golf into thinking they couldn't potentially participate any longer. It suggested that they suddenly became fragile and came with a fragile label and are resigned to light and safe kinds of exercise. One particular study in the Clinical Interventions in Aging Journal, I've spoke of this one before, but it it bears mentioning again as I kick off this section of a review of studies. Post diagnosis, there are considerations, and you have needs, definitely. You can, however, and possibly should find high intensity exercise that will start and wisely progress, that includes both high impact weight bearing exercise and high intensity weight training. That means heavier and fewer repetitions to fatigue. So that includes jumping as well as heavy weight training. The combination is ideal. A study that was intended to be 18 months long was cut short by COVID at 13 months when supervision was no longer possible in March of 2020. But even that, the researchers pulled the results they had at that moment, and it revealed that even without getting into the most intense phase, that last 5 months of the program, bone density was improved. In addition, compliance was really high. Injuries were non existent, there were zero. Let's look at some more research studies. So, from what I dug up and really seeking more recent studies, in a 12-month high impact program, significantly better results were found in women who did high impact exercise and medication and dietary changes than those who did medication and dietary changes alone. High impact jumping, hopping, explosive movements was both safe and effective. That research came about even back in 2010. What often, though, is the problem is the public, personal trainers, health coaches, those who are informing you of what you should be doing, do not always relay those studies to you. You get some of the picture, but often it's for liability purposes. Maybe they try to maintain safety. So I want you to have this information so that you can use what feels to you most applicable. In a 24-week aerobic dance program, so 6 months, this study in Medicine, published in 2019, showed 3 times per week high impact exercise with women not taking hormone replacement. So I know a lot of you are listening and you're not or want to know, do I have to? also improved bone density. Now, my suggestion would be to you, if you are taking HRT, you probably would have benefited a slightly greater level because there is some bone protection by taking the estrogen in an HRT. There are site specific benefits. Now, high intensity exercise is more effective stimulus for lumbar spine, bone mineral density, than low or than moderate intensity exercise is, but not so much true for that femoral neck or head. It depends. The latter may be due in this particular study to a lack of power in the exercises performed. So, very clearly in the research, there starts to be a hint at there is too much variability in the programming and protocols that are used and in the estimate of the ability to apply force that the participants in the study actually were able to do. So important that you realize that and we take that into consideration. And that those studies were published in Bone in 2021. There's additional proof for high intensity, high impact for bone losses in menopause in a 2020 study published in the International Journal of Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity. It looked at women 65 and older. So if you're listening and you think, is it too late for me? No, for them too, higher doses of activity, and particularly those involving resistance training, are significantly more effective. Now, I want to break that down. Let's talk about dose. When we talk about higher doses of activity that I just quoted, what is dose? Where exercise for bone density is concerned, it's important to know that increasing frequency beyond 2 to 3 times a week is not the best way to increase volume for bone density. The better application of volume is increased amount of resistance, heavier weight, and or increased sets. And this will result in a decreased number of repetitions. That is okay. In fact, where bone density is concerned, it is what you want. A weight that becomes heavy enough you cannot complete a lot of repetitions. While muscle can benefit from greater repetitions, as long as you perform it to fatigue, bone cannot. So if you're able to lift heavy weight, defined as reaching fatigue in 10 or fewer repetitions, you will have the most bone benefit. Now, if you have a limiting factor, a condition, prior injury, history of repeated injuries, you want to stay on the line of I'm safe, I'm not injured, as opposed to risk it. And that all comes from the International Journal of Behavior, Nutrition, and Physical Activity. While you may choose to believe that yoga or Pilates or walking improve bone density, you want to keep this in mind. In a review of literature that included 75 articles published from 1989 to 2019, results were too variable to conclude that exercise has specific effects on osteoporosis. And that is proof that some protocols do work, but some protocols do not benefit bone density. So if you learned something from that review, although the study itself says it's inconclusive, we know that there is conclusive evidence that some do. However, some don't. And this makes the statement, well, something is better than nothing, questionable if you have a specific goal. You can't do your boyfriend's or your daughter's or your best friend's exercise program and expect the specific results that you want without checking the match for your priorities. What we need really, this may be the mic drop of the day, is an exercisematch.com, right? So you can sort through the prolific options of exercise and be sure that your goal, if it's bone density or weight loss or reducing arthritic pain, has a match in the exercise. Flipping 50's mission is to make this a little bit easier for you. I do not have the app exercisematch.com yet, but you never know. There are other health benefits. So high intensity aerobic activity in a very small cohort of postmenopausal women increased HDL, and that's your good cholesterol level, decreased body fat, and improved VO2, which is your oxygen carrying capacity, less breathlessness, continued cardiovascular health. But it did nothing to lean muscle mass. Lean muscle mass does not increase with aerobic activity. Now, at first glance, there are good benefits. At second glance, you may not think so entirely. And here's what happens even with a loss of body fat, because there will be a decrease in overall weight, metabolism will be lower. And without adjustments in your dietary intake, ultimately, weight regain is likely. A 2018 study in the Journal of Bone Mineral Research employed a protocol of high intensity loads. It was 5 repetitions to fatigue times 5. So just 5 sets of 5 reps, meaning it was extremely heavy, for 4 different exercises, including high impact drop jumps. That means you're, say, standing on a chair, jumping to the floor. This study, too, had a high compliance level. Nobody dropped out. 1 in 100 adverse effects, and it happened to be a low back spasm. That was the problem, and very positive bone density benefits. So again, we're seeing high impact is not only safe, but is actually very effective. Let's talk about yoga and Pilates. I know you're out there. Some holes in the yoga study that was published in the resource study, Top Geriatric Rehabilitation, was that it was difficult to discern if yoga was exclusively responsible for density improvement, meaning there wasn't enough control in the activity and in the habits of the participants. They didn't track what they were eating, they didn't track additional exercise, whether they were or weren't doing resistance or other impact exercise. The monthly gain in bone mineral density was significant in the spine in the yoga study, and yet, I want to make sure that we compare that. So, I discussed earlier, there's a continuum. So, if you're on the couch, you're at bed rest, and you start doing yoga, is there more benefit? Is there benefit to doing that? Yes, right? But is there benefit to yoga beyond strength training? No. What about walking? It's got to be more beneficial than yoga, right? So, it's important that you realize it lies on a continuum. At 24 months, I want to give you the results for the bone mineral density. That was about 0.0072 was the gain. Now, that's enough in the study to call that significant gain. 0.0072 over 24 months as compared to strength training and the gain in 24 weeks. Okay. Talking months versus weeks, 2 years versus 6 months. The strength training benefits were 3.1%. Significantly difference, right? Significant difference in the length of time it took to results and in the amount of bone density we're talking about. Let's talk about yoga and Pilates both. In a 2021 study published in PLOS ONE, it showed only non-specific results on bone mineral density. Benefits do occur for balance and stability as a means of risk reduction from fall-related fractures, and there's value in those activities. What we each need to do is determine what is our realistic time spend. How much time do you have? And co-create a program based on the most influential exercises for each of our unique goals. It is possible to create a program that's inclusive of high intensity strength training, the high impact, and the balance and stability building movements. And it doesn't have to mean many and separate sessions going to yoga and Pilates and strength training. And you can integrate those into one session or several sessions, incorporating just alternating shorter sessions, but yet everything can be included. Minutes of balance and stability work regularly can be included in your warm ups and your cool downs, or just a short 5-minute practice following your coffee. Whole body vibration is the last thing that I want to give you because it's a question that frequently comes up. It is best indicated for the frail and the unable to perform other resistance exercises. And I'm going to back up for a second. For those of you who may not be familiar, whole body vibration plates are basically electronic plates where you will be standing on it and they will literally be vibrating. Now, you can stand on them, just stand. You can stand to do squats. You can hold weights and do exercises. You can stand on one leg, you can stand on two legs. There are a variety of ways to use them, but it is just in whole body vibration and stimulation. So they are best indicated for frail who are unable to perform other resistance exercises. For greatest effectiveness, they must contain a component of strength training. If you're using that solely, thinking, well, I'm going to do that instead, you're getting a small fraction of the benefit resistance training would provide. There is a degree of improvement in balance and stability from whole body vibration. However, the biggest benefits is from resistance training combined with whole body vibration, not in performing whole body vibration alone. The additional benefit from if the platform is available is worth it. You belong to a gym, it has one. The investment in your own equipment for home may or may not be the wisest use of time. Never, I would tell you that never in 37 years giving advice on how to build a home gym, what you would want in your home gym, have I ever recommended at the top 5, even the top 10, a whole body vibration plate. So think about the value of that potentially. There you have it. It's a summary of recent bone losses and menopause research provided during Menopause Awareness Month, and it's intended to get you pointed in the right direction for your exercise journey. I'll place some other good starters, good places to begin in the show notes as well. Flipping 50's 28-day kickstart has been a staple for our members for a really long time. And I've not offered it live for 2 years, giving the opportunity to be live in a group setting with me for 4 weeks in a row, but it currently lives in our members only area. And just this month, it is open, and you're invited to join me if it feels like a good fit. It is a 4-week, 28-day program, will be conducted during the month of November, the very last week of October. The doors close on Wednesday night, and we begin giving you materials to prepare, to get your recipes in order, line up your time for exercise. The exercise commitment is very small, but you will potentially benefit with sleep, with regular exercise, with understanding the value of regular exercise and the integration of supplements, of eating correctly with the benefits that you will get and take away from the exercise. So if you're in a position where you're not quite seeing the results that you need, or you need a start, this might be a good fit. It is purposefully offered for the start of holiday season to support navigating holiday temptations with ease, and the details will be in the show notes, and that'll be flipping50.com/high impact. So, if you are a health coach or personal trainer, or you wish to become one supporting women in menopause, I've got a resource for you too, and I'll add that to the show notes. Flipping 50 is the first and the only exclusively made for menopause, not just marketed to, but made for women in menopause fitness membership in the world. And I'm sharing with health coaches and with personal trainers the formula that I've used to create a business and a life that I love. And I love to share it with you. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.